Specter Nine. 2 words. That was all it took. The loudest seal in the room froze mid-laugh, his glass slipping from his hand and shattering on the floor. The bar went silent, like someone had cut the power. 5 operators stared at her as if they'd just seen a ghost. And here's the twist: she didn't look like a legend when she walked into Ironclad Tavern that Friday night. Hair tied back, plain shirt tucked into dark jeans, worn boots. No medals, no uniform. Just another face in a town built on warriors. But Coronado on payday weekend was no ordinary backdrop. The air was a cocktail of spilled beer and fried food. Neon signs bleeding across scarred wooden walls. A jukebox blasting classic rock while pool balls cracked like gunfire. Men who'd survived deployments filled every corner, their laughter sharp and heavy with war stories. At the bar, Elena Cross nursed a long neck, scrolling her phone like she belonged to the background. To the bartender, a Marine veteran inked to the elbows, she was just another quiet regular. But behind her, 5 SEALs dominated their corner. Lieutenant Cole Ranger Maddox led the noise, fresh from deployment, booming in his southern drawl. Professionals separate from pretenders. That's when you find out who's got steel in their veins. Heads turned, laughter rolled, and then Maddox's eyes found Elena. "What about you, Professor?" he taunted. "Got yourself a call sign, or just grading papers?" Her gaze lifted calm, steady, unflinching. And the words that followed detonated the room. Specter Nine. Maddox's hand trembled as he set the broken glass on the counter. The room hadn't gone this silent in years, not even during the televised Navy games when half the bar lived and died with every play. Now, every eye was on the woman at the bar who had just spoken 2 words, Specter Nine. He tried to laugh it off. A deep chuckle that came out thin. "Cute nickname," he said, brushing shards off his lap. "Where'd you hear that one? Some video game," but his voice betrayed him, and his teammates noticed. They'd seen Maddox stare down gunfire with a grin. Yet now he couldn't look Elena Cross in the eye. Elena didn't answer. She just took another measured sip of her beer. Her shoulders relaxed, but her gaze sharp. To anyone else, she still looked ordinary plain shirt, boots worn down by years of use. A quiet regular who'd slipped through the cracks of Coronado's nightlife. But to Master Chief Aaron Holt, seated 2 tables over, she looked like a ghost he'd been trying to forget. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Say it again," Holt said, his gravelly voice cutting across the room. Elena turned, meeting him with calm, unblinking focus. "Specter Nine, Operation Black Dagger." The words landed like a detonation. Holt's jaw tightened. He had read the after-action reports, the impossible stand in Mogadishu. The single operator who held off more than 40 fighters for 36 hours. Buying time for a convoy to extract 19 hostages. The mission most men in the teams whispered about, though the name of the operator had been buried under layers of classified ink. "Bullshit," one of Maddox's teammates muttered, forcing a laugh that nobody joined. "That op was JSOC only. Not our lane. Not our lane." Holt echoed slowly. He was staring at Elena now, as if weighing whether to salute or run. Maddox shifted, bristling at the sudden unease in his crew. He leaned closer to Elena, lowering his voice like he could wrestle control of the room back. "Listen, lady, you throw around that call sign in here. You better back it up, because if you're lying, I'll..." Elena cut him off, her tone razor-sharp but quiet enough that everyone had to lean in. "You'll what? Lieutenant, call your CO because he already knows who I am. Every commanding officer in Coronado does." The SEALs exchanged uneasy glances. Maddox's bravado faltered. Holt stood up slowly. The years of combat etched deeper into his face as he finally recognized the truth staring back at him. "You're her," he whispered. "You're the one who walked out of Black Dagger." The air in Ironclad Tavern grew heavy. Even the jukebox seemed to hold its breath. Maddox's smirk vanished, replaced with something he hadn't felt in years: doubt. And as Elena set her glass down with deliberate care, the room realized the night wasn't going to end in drunken stories. It was going to end with secrets no one was supposed to hear. The words hung in the air like shrapnel. Specter 9. Operation Black Dagger, for the men in the bar. It was a myth-given voice. For Elena Cross. It was a memory she could never bury. The jukebox faded into silence as if the machine itself remembered Mogadishu. Neon light flickered across her face, and in the stillness of the Ironclad Tavern, the past roared back. Somalia. 2020. The UH-60 Black Hawk went down hard, smoke bleeding into the sky as dust and fire swallowed the street. Screams of civilians mixed with the rattle of AK-47s and the whoosh of RPGs. The insertion had collapsed into chaos in seconds. By the time Elena pulled herself free of the wreckage, the rest of the team was scattered or dead. Her comms were shredded, her uniform torn, blood streaking her temple. But the mission wasn't over. Intelligence had been clear. 19 hostages were held in a warehouse complex on the city's south edge. Without the team, without backup, without extraction, it should have been impossible. Elena slung her HK-416 tight against her shoulder and moved, block by block, alley by alley. She learned to turn the city itself into a weapon. Shadows became cover, doors became choke points. Her rifle spoke in bursts, controlled and precise, dropping fighters before they even realized they'd been engaged. When night fell, she dragged the first group of hostages through a drainage canal, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. RPGs cracked overhead, walls shook, and still she pressed forward. Every hour she stayed alive bought another chance for the civilians to breathe. By the second night, the ammunition was down to scraps. She resorted to the Remington 700 she'd scavenged from the wreck, its bolt-action rhythm turning alleys into graveyards. A Glock 19 rode her hip. Last resort insurance against being overrun. 36 hours, that was the number stamped in the after-action report. 36 hours of constant movement, of carrying wounded, of laying down fire while 19 civilians clung to life behind her. 40 fighters fell in those streets. 40. But one hostage didn't make it. A boy, maybe 12, hit by shrapnel before she could shield him. His absence weighed heavier than every life she had saved. Back at the tavern, Holt's voice cracked. We all thought Black Dagger was a ghost story. Elena finally spoke, her voice even, steady, without triumph. It was never a story, just work that had to be done. Her eyes swept the room, settling on Maddox. His swagger had evaporated. In its place, silence. The kind born of a man who suddenly realizes his own stories aren't the loudest in the room. And then metal scraped outside. Headlights cut through the tavern's windows. A black Suburban idled at the curb. Elena set her beer down, jaw tightening. They're not supposed to know I'm here. The doors swung open, and the night shifted again. The name had detonated like a charge in the center of the room. Specter 9. By the time Elena Cross set her empty bottle on the bar, the Ironclad Tavern had gone completely still. Maddox sat frozen. His broad shoulders slumped as if the air had been punched out of him. His teammates weren't laughing anymore. They were staring, wide-eyed, at a woman they'd dismissed as just another civilian, from a corner table. Master Chief Aaron Holt rose slowly. 2 decades of classified deployments had carved lines into his face, but nothing had aged him faster than hearing that call sign again. He remembered the redacted reports, the whispers in SIFs about a lone operator in Somalia who had saved 19 hostages against impossible odds. The official line said Joint Task Force. The truth was buried deeper, and now it was standing in front of him. Holt's hands trembled as he pulled out his phone. I need a secure line, he muttered. Eddie, the bartender, led him into the back office without hesitation. Out front, Maddox found his voice, though it came out thin. You're lying, he croaked. Nobody does that. Nobody survives that. Elena's expression didn't change. She reached into her pocket, drew out a battered leather wallet, and placed a small ID card on the bar. Not a VA card, not a DD-214 relic. This one was marked with codes that didn't exist in any normal database. Maddox leaned forward, and his face drained of color. JSOC, he whispered. A ripple passed through the bar. For the older veterans, the meaning was clear: Joint Special Operations Command, the tier above the tier, the shadow behind the shadows, in the back office. Holt's voice was urgent. "Low, sir, I have positive identification on Specter 9. Yes, at a public location. Her cover is compromised." Keystrokes rattled in his ear. "Commands fired across secure networks." "Understood, sir. I'll keep her stable until you arrive." When Holt returned, Maddox looked like a man who had just stared into the abyss. Elena, meanwhile, sat exactly as before, back to the wall, hands relaxed but ready, eyes tracking every movement in the room. She didn't need to prove anything. Her entire posture spoke the truth. Maddox finally whispered, How are you here? Drinking a beer." Like a regular person for the first time that night. Elena's expression softened. "Because that's all I am now. A regular person, trying to finish a degree and live a life that doesn't require a rifle." The words should have soothed. Instead, they cut deeper. Maddox shook his head, struggling to reconcile the legend with the human. But Specter 9, Black Dagger, "You're supposed to be what?" Elena asked quietly. 10 feet tall, bulletproof, covered in medals so strangers know what I've done. No, that was a job. A brutal one. And it ended. For a moment. Silence reigned. Then headlights slashed across the windows. A black Suburban rolled to the curb. Doors clicking open in unison. Men in plain clothes stepped out, their silhouettes sharp against the neon glow. Elena's eyes hardened. "They're not here for a drink," she said. And the Ironclad Tavern braced itself for whatever came next. The Suburban's engine faded into the night, leaving the Ironclad Tavern in uneasy silence. Eddie, the bartender, wiped down the counter as if polishing away what had just unfolded. Holt sat frozen at his stool, whiskey forgotten. And Elena Cross Specter 9 slid into her jacket and stepped into the Coronado night, as if the weight of the evening belonged to someone else. The air outside was cooler, salt-heavy. She walked without hurry, boots striking pavement in a rhythm that was steady, deliberate. The Pacific wasn't far, and soon the neon haze of the bar gave way to moonlight stretched across water. Waves broke in steady whispers, pulling her toward the shoreline. She unlaced her boots, let them dangle from one hand, and walked barefoot into the surf. The tide curled cold around her ankles, grounding her in a way that nothing else could. It wasn't Mogadishu anymore. No fire streaking the sky, no gunfire carving through silence, just water, horizon, and the faint hiss of sand collapsing beneath each wave. Footsteps approached behind her, hesitant but determined. Petty Officer Jennifer Hayes stopped a few paces away, the glow of the pier light catching her face. "Ma'am," she said, voice soft. "I didn't mean to intrude. I needed to thank you." Elena turned, studying the younger woman. Hayes carried the same questions. She once had the same hunger to know if the sacrifices ahead would matter. "Walk with me," Elena said. They moved along the shoreline, boots in hand, the city lights shrinking behind them. Hayes finally asked the question that had been pressing against her chest since the bar. "How do you carry it all? How do you go from 36 hours in hell, rescuing 19 people under fire, to living like none of it ever happened?" Elena's reply was calm, almost tender. "You don't forget. You don't erase. You live with it until it stops being a wound and becomes a scar. And scars don't make you weaker. They remind you that you've healed." Hayes swallowed hard, her eyes shining. "But what about nightmares? What about the memories? They never vanish. Elena admitted. Anyone who says otherwise hasn't lived through enough to have them. But they change. You learn to carry them without letting them carry you. They stopped where the pier's wooden shadow stretched long across the sand. Elena placed her hand gently on Hayes's shoulder. The most important thing I ever learned is this heroism isn't the firefight or the medal. It's what you do afterward. It's choosing to build something good out of what tried to break you, for the first time that night. Elena smiled a real smile, unguarded. Hayes straightened, her own resolve firming. "Thank you, ma'am," she whispered. "Carry it forward." Elena said, "Because one day, someone younger than you will need to hear it too." They parted at the pier, Hayes heading back toward the base. Elena turning up the beach. The horizon hinted at dawn, the first light glinting on restless water, for the first time in years. It didn't taste like survival. It tasted like possibility, because Specter 9 had ended her war, and Elena Cross had found her next mission to live. True service doesn't end when the uniform comes off. The bravest battles are the unseen ones, choosing to heal, to rebuild, and to keep serving in ways the world may never notice.